Zac Efron heads to Vietnam to bring his friends some beer in the Apple original film, The Greatest Beer Run Ever. It's from director Peter Farrelly, so we should expect some comedy mixed with drama. But does it deliver? I made that pun. To show support for his neighborhood friends serving in Vietnam, Chickie Donohue decides to do something totally outrageous: travel to the front line by himself to bring the soldiers their favorite can of American beer. So Zac Efron stars as Chickie, this guy from New York who's very outspoken and passionate when it comes to his friends. Now, he's a bit of a hothead, but he means well. And in this rash moment, he blurts out that he's going to bring beer to all his neighborhood friends that are serving over in Vietnam. Now, this is based on a true story, and then we follow Chickie on his trip. Efron is great when he's showcasing the uncertainty and fear a real civilian would have who's trying to make their way in a hostile environment. And he gives these looks that translate well, where we can almost hear his unspoken thoughts just through the looks in his eyes. Now, I have zero clue as to how accurate all of the info that's displayed here actually is. I mean, we're told it's based on a true story, so that could just be the framework, or it could be every single thing just told from Chickie's perspective. So when we watch these actions that feel almost outlandish, there's the choice to either embrace it as storytelling or to pick a side on believability. Now, I chose to go the route of storytelling, which then provided a more entertaining way to approach it. Some of the cinematography in this is excellent, especially as the film takes us further and further into the Vietnam countryside. Now, the lush jungles, they're vibrant with just a ton of variety of greens, which then those are offset at times with this bright orange flash of napalm. Now, it's horrifying, but it's also visually pleasing. Despite the story starting off quickly, the length becomes very apparent even before the movie reaches the halfway point. This is slightly more than 2 hours, and there are times that I felt it. The first portion of the film builds out who Chickie is, and we get to a point pretty fast where it makes sense that this dude would just blurt something out in a moment of frustration, and then he has to have his pride not allow him to back down. Now, the time from the beginning of the movie to when Chickie is on his way, it's not long, especially in comparison with the rest of his journey. So we then spend about 90-ish minutes watching Chickie just finagle his way through a war zone. Crowe also stars in this, and I love how his character is used to show the change in Chickie. Now, they first meet when Chickie has recently arrived in Vietnam, and then the next time they meet, Chickie has had a ton of eye-opening experiences. I like the transition of Chickie from naive to harrowed understanding. I mean, the journey makes sense, especially from a character growth and realization perspective, but it does take a long time to get to that point. Now, I appreciate that the transition isn't rushed and that we actually get to witness all that Chickie sees that really creates this change in him, but there are lulls within the trek that made me feel the time. Now, something I really appreciate in this story is that the film doesn't back down from showcasing a character who's not afraid to illustrate growth. I mean, it goes from a hard stance that the war is necessary and doing good to then display a perspective that's open and willing to learn. I mean, that's an excellent trait to exhibit, and I'm glad that the story decides to include it. As is probably expected, there is some commentary that's present in the storytelling. Now, some of it is preachy and heavy-handed at times, and it lacks a lot of subtlety in the messaging, but that's not always a bad thing. But there are opportunities to dive even more deeper and then create a more scathing commentary, which the story doesn't go for. And while the context of this story is the Vietnam War, I don't think that's the actual focus of Farrelly's commentary. I mean, there are points that are touched on, and even some that are poignant, but in these areas, a statement is made, and then the just story goes along its way. There's a line that Russell Crowe's character says in the latter part of the film, and he says, "The lies and the conspiracy to distort the truth, that's what hurts America." Now, I believe that's aimed at more recent government offense than what actually transpired 50 plus years ago. And there are also other points that some soldiers make, especially as it relates to their treatment when returning home. Now, this isn't a new take on the idea, but the topic, again, is only brought up in a fleeting moment. Now, I think this is entertaining for a casual watch, and Zac Efron is charismatic in his role. I mean, he's easy to watch, even when he's idiotic or naive, just because he never loses his charm. And while this story does provide some emotional moments, I don't think it gives us anywhere near the heartfelt impact that a movie like Good Morning Vietnam provides. That one also showcases a shift in perspective of the lead role, where the eyes of the character are open to the real horrors and then showcases growth based on the new experiences. But that one hits harder in the emotional realm. So overall, The Greatest Beer Run Ever capitalizes on the charm of Zac Efron in the lead role. The story drags at points, and the social commentary doesn't fully commit to a stance. But the narrative isn't afraid to show a character arc filled with learning and growth, showcasing how ideals can be affected and changed based on experience and the willingness to be open to a new perspective. There's no sex or nudity, a bunch of profanity, and a ton of violence. This one's not terrible, but it's not excellent either. I give The Greatest Beer Run Ever 3 out of 5 couches. So what's a character journey movie that you really like? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.